Hello and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie, and I am excited to talk tonight about some elements that are very under discussed when it comes to how to live every single day with such intention. Y'all, for so many of us, for me, I lived the majority of my 20s with just every single day passing me by. And it wasn't just my 20s, it was also high school and earlier on too. I felt like I was living partially asleep. I was so fixated on everyone and everything around me to give me meaning, to assign the intention which I should pursue. And so it was never actually by my own accord that I was really showing up and living every single day. It was very much so patterning what was modeled for me, or it was doing as I should. And this morning during vertical alignment, I actually gave myself a good chunk of time today to just really kind of take a little bit of a mini retreat and really get centered and just really kind of lean into the next 53 days. We've got 53 days left in 2025, which just blows my mind. And it's like, okay, how do I want to live? And this conversation tonight, I actually want to take a moment with you. I've only done this a handful of times, but I feel compelled to do this right now because I need it for me. And I just welcome you to join me. What I'm going to do is actually take a moment right here, right now, to just get really, really centered. This is a practice that I do every single morning at vertical alignment, where I close my eyes. I just literally take some deep breaths and I'll journal. I'll turn on quiet, kind of meditative music, and I'll just really, really listen. And in these moments right here, where when I'm live with you, I'll do that for maybe 10, 15 seconds. So not at all long compared to my morning vertical alignment time. And vertical alignment for me is a daily moment by moment practice. It's an ongoing pursuit of bringing myself, my physical mind, my physical body, my soul, my emotions, and my spirit under the alignment and into alignment under the hierarchy of my ideal with the divine at the head. And in this process of kind of bringing everything into alignment, it really forces me to slow down and to just remember here in this moment of who am I and why am I here and why am I here in this moment doing what I'm doing, because it's so easy to move so rapidly and to be so fixated on everything externally that we forget our why. And when I think of why, the way that I kind of describe it is that why is the fuel in the engine. It propels us forward. And so if we're not clear on our why, someone else's why is going to be moving us forward, and thus we're going to be moving in the wrong direction. We're going to be moving off course. I really love the concept of a bowling alley, where our ideal and the goals that we set forth for ourselves are the bowling pins. And when we throw the ball, if it's someone else's why being the propelling force, we're going to go into the wrong lane. We're going to go off course. We're going to go into the gutters. And so it's so important that our why is the very fuel in our tank propelling us onward. And so with that, I just want to take a minute here with you. Y'all, I have spent much of today just being kind of contemplative, actually working on knowing and building out the ecosystem for 2025. And then also, these next 53 days through the end of the year, how do I want to live them? And so this conversation tonight, we're really going to talk about creating with intention and really designing every single day and having an experiential life, truly being awake and alive in every single moment, so that we really live. So that, and one of the biggest KPIs, key performance indicators for me, if I actually am being present in that moment and really living, is, can I remember what happened yesterday? Can I remember what happened the day before that? Was I actually being present enough to be able to remember? And so with that, just as we kind of dive in, I just want to take a moment. I'm going to close my eyes and invite you to do that with me. And I'm just going to take a couple deep breaths, and I'm actually going to say a quick prayer for us, because these conversations have the power to bring about real change for you and me. I'm talking in real time, processing in real time, not having a script, not necessarily even having a points 1, 2, and 3. Sometimes I do, but tonight I don't. And in these conversations with you, when I come in with it rather unscripted, usually this is where I end up having some really cool revelations, and I get to do that with you. And so for that reason, I'm just going to take a minute here, and I invite you to join me, or you can wait. And I'm just going to close my eyes and say a quick prayer. God, I thank you for the fact that we have the opportunity to experience redemption. Every single one of us, God, that the very thing that caused me so much devastation, that just broke me wide open, was the very thing that catalyzed my mission. God, thank you that that is my why. That emotional health and the pursuit of it and the activation of our entire being, I get to now share that and bring it to those listening here tonight, bring it to all of us on Thursdays as we go through this knowing workshop. God, thank you that people are hungry for this message. God, thank you that it's time for us to wake up. It's time for us to truly live. God, I thank you for the change that is being done in my life and the lives of people who are attending these workshops and the lives of the people who are actually implementing this work. God, I ask that tonight's conversation would be precisely what it should be for the greatest impact. In Jesus' name. Y'all, I've been thinking a lot about AI. I was on a panel 2 weeks ago about the future of marketing and AI, and what is that going to look like together. And even tonight, I was checking out a book about just really how the world is changing, and it already is, much less so it's going to change even more so, where effectively our jobs are just not really going to be needed for the most part, because they're going to be entirely replaced with artificial intelligence, with robots. And so there's just this murmuring of fear that I keep hearing trickling through communities. Um, Even I heard the other day that a really, really wonderful friend and coach, they're on the brink of bankruptcy because they are not getting clients, because people are not willing to pay because they don't have money. And there's just a lot changing in the water. It's like this unsettling element where it's like when you peer into the water and it's murky and it's moving and you don't really know what's inside. That's what it feels like right now for so many of us in various industries. And there's a lot of propensity to lean into the water and just become so fixated on the darkness and become so fixated on the unknown, and really allow fear to stir within us. And so what I've just been kind of going back and forth on in my mind is, how do we allow for the realistic examination of what's coming and preparation for that, and also choose what we're going to fixate on in addition to that? Because when I think about the life that I want to create and the life I want to design and who I want to be, and let's take away life. Let's just talk about today. Today, AI has not taken over all of our jobs yet. There are layoffs happening, and there is a very real element of that, but it's not at all to the point that it probably will get to, where there's just an entirely new economic system in place where we're having transactions based off of, I don't know, it's not fiat currency, because that's going to be completely abysmal and that's going to be gone. And so I don't know what the new structure is going to look like, but what I do know is that we're not there yet. And so to fixate so much on the uncertainty of the future and allow for fear to succumb you and me, man, how is that going to be healthy for us unless we're able to remove the fear and look at the future and the unknown, just considering the unknown, the future and all that it could hold. But y'all, so much as there's fear, our survival instincts start kicking in, and we actually are unable to truly be creative, be innovative, when fear is clouding our minds. The other day on the Foundations of Knowing workshop, I was just sharing how it is so easy for fear and really any kind of lower emotion. And when I say lower emotion, it could mean shame, it could mean guilt, that any one of those could cloud literally our lenses. It's like when you go to the optometrist and you press your face against the dials and they start switching them and you begin to see clearly. The more we're able to move away from fear, move away from shame, move away from guilt. And David Hawkins talks about having numerical values assigned to emotional levels. And the more you kind of move up in the numerical values of these different emotions, from the negative at the very bottom all the way up through, I think that at the pinnacle is peace. And then you've got love and you've got joy up there. And then lower down, you've got pride and ego, fear, guilt, shame. All of those are just much, much lower. And so the more that we're actually able to switch the dials of the lenses through which we're viewing the world and move out of shame, switching out guilt, shifting out ego, pride, fear, and start moving into courage, start moving into love, all of a sudden, our nervous system is so connected. So if we actually are operating in fear, we're not going to be able to create. And so if we want to be able to exist in this place where we're looking at the future, there's a lot of uncertainty, and we actually want to be useful to create a product, a service, a community, some semblance of meaning that can really help and be of use during this time of change and transition, we cannot do that. We fundamentally cannot do that. Our bodies, our nervous systems are unable to innovate, to ideate, to create when they're in those lower levels of emotions. So part of this work that we do in knowing, of turning on our emotional intelligence, turning on our intellectual intelligence, turning on our physical intelligence and spiritual intelligence, really just making all of us activated. Part of that also is identifying, oh, there's that emotion there. There's that emotion of fear. There's that emotion of shame. And the other part of it is not just being aware, but it's having the ability and the tools. It's literally like developing a muscle to be able to move out of that state of emotion and choose, I actually want to feel a different emotion. And so as we talk about cultivating emotional intelligence, the definition of emotional intelligence is to be aware of, to understand, to express, and be in control of one's own emotions. And it's also the ability to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and with empathy, with wisdom and with empathy. And so in order for us to really cultivate emotional intelligence, we actually have to be aware of what's going on inside us. But if we don't understand how the physical intelligence connects to the emotional, we're never really going to be able to get our body into kind of like what I consider to be stasis. Just get it to be really, really calm. So if I start feeling fear, what is a physical, and what that means and what that looks like is that my body usually starts to tighten. It means that I start actually getting really, really tense. It means that my mental cognitive ability is starting to slowly shut down. All of those elements of when our body goes into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, I call it the 4 Fs. When our body starts actually moving into survival mode because we are fearful as the emotion, our body reacts in a way that impacts all the other parts of us. So there's no compartmentalization between my intellect, my emotion, my physical body, and my spirit. It's all connected. And so the more we become aware of that, and then being able to kind of just be curious, like, oh, that's so awesome to understand my body, to understand who I am. Now, what's the new target? Because until we set a new target, we're going to end up just repeating old behaviors and end up in loops that we can't escape from. It's effectively an old program that's running in our body, in our mind, in our emotional state, that we need to teach a new program. And in just putting it in those terms, someone said this, Dr. Joe Dispenza said this. He said that concept around the old program. And as I was thinking about that for myself, it brought tremendous relief for me that actually it's just an old program and I can totally conquer an old program. It's not this big mammoth. And I actually found myself, I had this narrative that I would say when I started getting into that state of overwhelm. I would start saying, and my partner called this out for me, I would start saying, this is so significant. This is such a big deal. And they'd be like, No, it's not. Like, it's actually okay. But in one sense, it didn't matter them telling me it was okay. It didn't matter them telling me that it wasn't such a big deal. I actually needed to retrain my nervous system and come up with a new program to replace the old. I can't just say stop doing that because my mind, my body, my emotions, all of it is activated. All of it is turned on. It's like a big train barreling down, going in the wrong direction. And I can't just say, put a block there and say, stop. The train's going to crash. I need to actually set up a new track and redirect it. Man, my dad was listening. He loves trains. I freaking love my dad. Melina, I'm so happy to see you here. You said such divine timing. I was thinking about fear today. Oh, I love this. And if you want to join the workshops, I just saw your comment. I'd love, love, love to have you. Just send me a note and I'll send you the invite there. Y'all, this concept of how to control our fear. There's something about it that really is sitting in. I likened it this morning. I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And I had this reminder that pain actually was the very thing that helped me learn to be present, which it's like, why do I want to be present in pain? But if I will not sit in the ashes, there is no way that what needs to die or be released or be let go of will ever be able to move. I can never move through the pain if I'm not willing to sit in it. And when I say let it die or let it go, there are those old programs, something needs to happen to them. Some of them do need to die. Some of them do need to be reborn into something new so that we can change. But unless we're willing to sit in the truth and in the reality of what is going on, whether it's painful, whether it's fear, I actually was having a conversation with someone very close to me, and they were sharing. It was so personal, and it was so vulnerable, and I felt really, really honored. And they were sharing something that was like terrifying to them, and effectively, I think it's okay to say this because I didn't say who it was. Effectively, they're like, I am terrified I'm going to cheat on my partner. They've been married for 30 years. They said, I'm terrified I'm going to cheat on my partner. So I avoid the other gender at all costs. And I dress a certain way to deter the other gender. It's like I'm so terrified of my own self that I'll just go end up in someone else's bed. They were like ridden with fear, and that has impacted them for 30 years, the way that they interact with the opposite sex. And y'all, I actually asked them, I said, I want you to close your eyes and imagine the worst possible scenario. And they looked at me with their eyes so big, like, why would I think about that which I am afraid of? But until we pull back the curtain, until we shine the light in the darkness will always have power over us. So there's something about allowing pain, fear, each one of those kind of like lower emotional experiences that we find ourselves in, sitting in it with intention, sitting in the ashes, sitting in the darkness, and flipping on the light switch and being like, I'm going to explore every nook and cranny that's in here because I cannot and I will not let you master me. And this is what's so cool, is that when we actually are willing to do this, y'all, all of a sudden the monsters under the bed become minuscule. The monsters in the closets, it's like, oh, they're not really there. It was all in my imagination. It was all in fear, or it was all in the past. Because until we deal with the pain or fear of the past, we're projecting that onto the future. That's going to be the dial that we look through the world because we haven't dealt with what's back there. So it catches up to us. It impacts us in the present moment so that we cannot even experience right here, right now, for the integrity of what it is. And that should get all of our attention. Am I even able to know the truth and reality of the present moment, or is the past clouding my vision of what's right in front of me? How much? And actually, I'm so glad that we're talking about this on the Knowing podcast. So the Knowing podcast is my in-person interviews. They're high quality, amazing conversations. And I finished season 2, I think last month. So Atiba D'Souza, I want to go find that one, and I'm going to drop it in the link here in the chat. There was such a good conversation because what he and I were talking about was how effectively these old narratives that you and I have, whether it's a fear-based narrative, whether it's pain that hasn't been processed, all of those are effectively clouding our ability to engage with somebody else. And then we're blaming them and attributing our pain and our hurt and our fear to them, when in reality, it's something not to do with them hardly at all. Maybe they sparked it and triggered it in us. And so, with this whole conversation, so much of it has to do with attribution of pain. And then when I attribute it, and it's like, oh man, that was when I was 10. All right, now I got to go sit back in that moment of being 10 years old, and go sit in that experience. It was so funny. I mentioned something to my partner. I was like, oh man, I felt myself just get really angry about something that happened by someone close to me in my life like 3 years ago. And I was like, man, have I not forgiven that person? I thought I did, but I just got super angry. And they were like, well, have you proven to little Christene that you're going to protect her next time? Man, even as I say that, I just like, mm, what? That is so wise. Because the reality is, when I feel angry, I'm not I'm not really even necessarily angry at that person. I'm angry at how I handled it. I'm angry at the fact that I gave in and like poured fuel on the fire. And the way that I poured fuel on the fire was being empathetic. And so little Christene did that most of her life, in her adult life too. So it's not even just tending to little Christene, it's tending to Christene at 24 years old, who had that same thing happen to her, where she was so empathetic that it actually moved into, I heard this phrase, the dark side of empathy. Every experience, every emotion, every good thing about us also has a shadow. And so empathy, there's so much power and so much beauty in it, and there's a shadow there. And the shadow is that I can go and sit in their experience and completely self-abandon and ignore mine. And then I come back to my experience and I'm like, wait a second, this is entirely unfair. But I've already sat in their experience and really almost like egged them on to really kind of believe this element and listen and be so caring and so thoughtful. And then I go back to my experience and I'm like, that's not true at all what you're saying. And so there's this element of, we have to go back, sit in our experience, and when we talk about forgiveness, there's a forgiveness piece where, and I understood this in so much of a better way when I had this visual in my mind. So forgiveness is effectively us taking that person at the pinnacle of our mountain. We've put them there. They're at the very top. That's me putting, sitting in her position, who hurt me. And then I just take them off the mountain, my mountain, and then I reclaim my position. I reclaim my seat. I reclaim and take back my power that I gave them, because in anger, in this moment, we're giving them so much power over us that, frankly, if I hold on to my power, I can sit in their experience and be like, I can see what you're saying, and I disagree, and I hate that you're in pain right now. But I don't have to self-abandon. I don't have to negate my own experience. And I also don't have to get pissy about theirs, because I'm keeping my power. I'm not doling it out to every person I see in the name of empathy. And I think that that's so important for us to consider, when we think about these words, when we think about what does empathy actually mean, really leaning into these words that we throw off really carelessly. And actually, I want to pull up what I wrote today, because I was really leaning into the meaning of intention and this concept of intention, and how do we live every day creating and designing our life. So much of that is only possible when we actually have defined our targets, defined our values, defined what the values really mean in practical application. So I'm just going to read really fast this meaning of empathy, because it really was so, so, so meaningful to me. Okay, so the meaning of empathy, the meaning of intention. Because if I want to live my life with intention, what does intention actually mean? So intention, let's see. This was so long what I wrote. God bless anyone who read this. All right, intention. Let's see here. Here we go. Late 14th century, intention, purpose, design, aim, or object, will, wish, desire that is intended. From the Latin intentionem, a stretching out, straining, exertion, effort, attention. And then the Middle English, emotion, feelings, heart, mind, mental faculties, understanding. Y'all, intention, if we want to live with intention, that means that every single part of our intelligences is online, activated, present. And I love this because we all talk about living with intention, but are we actually living with intention? Are we actually taking the time to turn on every part of us? Because the consequence of not doing that is that we're not living wholehearted. We're not living in a full human experience, but then the consequence of that also, there's a consequence on either side. There's always a cost. So the cost is if we don't do this, if we don't live with intention, if we don't turn on all of our intelligences, we're never going to live in a full human, wholehearted, full way for all that's possible for us to experience in this journey called life. And then the other cost, if we do turn on all of our intelligences, is that we're going to have to sit in the pain, sit in the emotions, sit in the experience that we haven't moved through. Because otherwise, for so long as all of that exists back there, we're always going to have those things come up and cloud our ability to see in the present moment. And so, y'all, as we're thinking about this new world, this new age of AI, and we're thinking about, man, what am I going to do with my business? Everything's changing. My job's being replaced. Well, we fundamentally cannot think creatively and sit in the unknown, void of fear, right? Sans fear. We're not going to be able to do that until we do the work to reconcile with the past and reconcile with all that's come before us to then be free to move ahead. Y'all, it was so wild. This conversation about this moment earlier that I was saying, this person who I remembered the moment and I really made me mad. And I was like, did I forgive her? In that moment in time, I felt so much like there were just talons of fear in my back over what are people going to think? What is she going to say? She had already said some things that were just so deeply painful to me. And so I felt this, like I was at this crossroads. And this was 3 years ago, yeah. And I was at this crossroads. Am I going to take my power back? Let go of those talons of fear. Basically, stop believing what she said about me. Am I going to allow the narratives of other people, the pain of the past, to be in the driver's seat of my life, to be at the pinnacle of my mountain? Or am I going to take my power back, sit in the driver's seat, be willing to square off and face the narratives that she told me and say, that is a lie? Are we confident in who we are enough to square off with what other people have said that we know fundamentally is not true? Or are we going to sit there waffling because we actually haven't done the work to really know the truth for ourselves? So this work of going inward, understanding, being aware of, expressing, being in control of our emotions, all of those elements that constitute emotional intelligence, if we're willing to do that, then we can stand tall, shoulders back when people come at us. And y'all, this is really important, especially as we enter into the holidays. Family can be more, they can be more inciting than anyone else in our life. And so if we're not willing to do this work, we're going to show up at Christmas, show up at Thanksgiving, and we're either going to play small, we're either going to be hiding, we're either going to create havoc and rage, because so much of the time I've seen people, and all of us, right? We're all tempted to either play small or, what's it called? Buttress the system and be kind of rebellious to show I don't agree with how this was. Well, now I'm going to intentionally cause strife. So either way, either we're hiding and kind of being codependent, or we're actually showing up and intentionally causing issues because we haven't healed from the past. Either way, we're reacting from the pain of the past and not able to actually live in triumph in this moment and in our power. So the more that we have unreconciled pain from the past, the more fear is clouding our vision and clouding the lens through which we view the world, the less power and potency we have to be in the present moment, and the less ability we have to create for the future and actually be our own heroes and solve our own problems. Y'all, it is wild how the very problems in our lives, if they're being ignored, we could actually be ignoring the very thing that we were here and destined to solve. It was such a fun story. A friend of mine shared the story of Reed Hastings. He was so pissed off. This man, 20, 30 years ago, was so pissed off at Blockbuster. He had a $40 late fee for a film. Most people would just pay that, but he was so worked up and so pissed off that he went off and started Netflix. Y'all, if we are ignoring the problems in our lives, if we are ignoring the pain and we're not willing to sit in the ashes, there is no way that there can be transformation and no way that we can create anything new. We will never be able to see real change for ourselves, much less create a product or a solution that could be the very thing that solves for everyone else in our life. So with that,